every single day. Close to 1 million bus riders, 48%, board without paying the fare.
I yell at some people, you want to see service cuts? Keep doing that. People who don't pay their fare.
So, half of New York City no longer believes in paying for public transit, and they've just stopped. Which is stealing, but this fare evasion surge is happening at the worst possible time for the city. Because our public transit networks, our subways, our buses, this whole system has been run so poorly for so long that it's now out of money, and if people aren't paying to use it, it's going to shut down.
The NYPD and MTA are joining forces to crack down on bus fare evasion. Anyone caught skipping out on the fare will be fined.
Watch as this man is issued a summons for hopping a bus, then he's promptly pulled off a second bus for trying to board again without paying.
The problem has been growing, especially on buses where very little enforcement has happened traditionally. Subway riders, they skip out on the fare at a rate of 18%, but roughly half of all bus riders do not swipe a Metro card to board.
It's really annoying to get on the bus and have people either come in through the back doors or in the front and just walk right by and not pay.
It's annoying. Pay your fare.
Sometimes I have a feeling I'm the only one who's paying the fare.
So here's the deal. How much could the MTA get if everybody paid their share? An extra $500 million into the kitty. That's how much we're skipping out on.
The message to the non-paying rider, pay your fare and enter the subway system and the buses lawfully.
So now that no one's paying to ride the bus, the city is sending out its enforcers to catch fare evaders. But what everyone's missing about this recent surge in fare evasion is that it's been going on for a long, long time, steadily getting worse every single year, and nothing's been done to stop it, ever. And doing nothing was the plan all along because the city was banking on the start of its controversial tax on traffic, which would have generated billions of dollars per year in extra money. And according to critics, would have also caused the cost of living in New York to surge as companies pass those taxes on to their customers. But that plan was blocked, and if the city still wants to offer subway and bus service, it better figure out how to get people to start paying for it. Because running these things costs hundreds of millions of dollars every single year, yet year after year, the city has just let scofflaw after scofflaw board the bus and ride for free. Which reveals that most people don't think the bus is worth paying for at all in the first place. Which brings us to the real reason why we've now got a massive fare evasion problem on our buses. They're slow, they're unreliable, and defenders of fare evasion say they just simply aren't worth the fare the city's asking for. And up until recently, nobody was busted for fare evading. But as bad as the service is, nobody here realizes that the $2.90 bus fare is actually only $1.45 per rider because half of us don't pay, leading our entire public transit network further down the path of bankruptcy. But while critics say these crackdowns are wrong because they unfairly target the needy, proponents say they're necessary because the entire system is ready to collapse, and the only way to save it is to lay down the law. So bus service in this city, it's definitely not perfect, and I can understand why many people are so frustrated with it, they don't want to pay for it. First of all, it's incredibly unreliable. When there's traffic jams, the bus is late, sometimes it never shows up, and sometimes it doesn't stop long enough for people to actually get on. It's incredibly frustrating. But none of those are legitimate reasons to steal from the bus company and ride for free. After all, if nobody pays, there aren't going to be any more buses. And buses are able to serve parts of the city that don't have working or reliable subway access. For some people, it's their only way to get anywhere. And they're also not free to operate, which is why we're now at a breaking point where not enough people are paying for them, and it looks like there might be service cuts if something's not done. But now that the city is trying to do something, they're encountering a big problem because this problem of fare evasion, it's so massive. With so many people not doing it, whatever the city tries to do may not work.
It's really annoying to get on the bus and have people either come in through the back doors or in the front and just walk right by and not pay.
The MTA says during the first 3 months of this year, 48% of bus riders did not pay to get on board.
So according to the city, 48% of the people on that bus that just left didn't pay to use it, and that's been happening for the first 3 months of this year. Which is ridiculous, because if any business tried to run itself at a 50% discount all the time, it would cease to operate. And the city better do something quick, or else our bus system might be in that type of predicament. Some people are saying that if this keeps up, the city is going to have to reduce the amount of bus service it offers, because that's the simplest way to recoup costs. But to many people, that's a bad idea, because a lot of the folks that don't pay say they don't pay because the service is terrible, and if it only gets worse, won't even less people start paying or stop paying? Yet the city's trying to force people to do it by sending out the fare evasion enforcers to write fines and give tickets. And when interviewed, people riding the bus say that they understand it can't be free and that everyone should pay, even the people who ride it from time to time without paying for it.
I just put my head down and wonder why they don't pay.
Some we spoke with admitted to not paying because they couldn't afford it.
I used to do it back in the day, so I know what makes people do that, but I don't encourage it anymore. But that doesn't mean I don't understand people's, like, what their thought process could be.
The MTA says,
you know, these are some pretty honest responses, and it seems like everybody riding the bus, including the people who don't pay to use it, understand that that's wrong and people should pay, or the service is going to get so bad nobody wants to take it because it just isn't worth it. But part of the reason why there are so many people boarding these buses without paying is because during the events of 2020, the city decided that it wasn't going to police fare evasion. In fact, the city actively encouraged rear door boarding for health and safety reasons because the driver sits in the front. But the problem with that is the front is where you have to pay to ride the bus. And apparently people got in the habit of riding the bus for free. That's what the head of the MTA says. And he says now, to all of a sudden start making people pay to ride the bus again, it's going to be an uphill battle. And now it's an even bigger uphill battle because the city has waited until half the people on the bus don't pay. This would have been easier had they started back in 2019 when only around 20% of people who were riding the bus weren't paying.
the MTA says in 2022 it lost $315 million because of bus fare evasion and $285 million as a result of subway turnstile jumpers. Mark calls it a sad sign of
$315 million. That's 2022's figures for people not paying to ride the bus. Yet in 2022, nobody said this was a big problem, but it obviously was. Especially when you add to it another $300 million loss from folks skipping out on their subway fares. The entire transit system loses about $600 million a year. No wonder it's falling apart and bankrupt. But the real reason the city never thought fare evasion was a big deal was because it's never been planning to enforce this stuff. No, instead they were just gonna tax every single car on the road with their congestion pricing scheme. That's what those toll readers are for that you see all over the city. But this scheme, it's been paused by the governor because it's incredibly controversial. And some people believe that not only will it distribute pollution from Manhattan, where rich people live, to other parts of town where those rich people don't live, like the Bronx, Brooklyn, Staten Island. They say it's also going to cause companies to pass the cost of those tolls onto their customers. And when things like your food that's in a grocery store are getting hit with a congestion tax, it will make everyone's food and everyone's life more expensive. But now, because the city can't tax cars to pay for buses that nobody wants to pay for, now the people on the bus have to pay for it. And to many people, that's how it should work. Right? If a service is useful, it should cost something and people should pay to use it. But the problem is there were fare evasion crackdowns about a year ago, and those did nothing to turn around this sinking ship of people not paying to use the bus, which makes people ask, how is this new round of crackdowns gonna do anything?
Has this problem gotten worse?
As a matter of fact, believe it or not, it's doubled in 2020. Only 21% of the people weren't paying their fares. It's now almost 50%. Now, MTA...
You know, listening to everyone talk about this, you'd almost think that 4 years ago, 20% of people not paying to ride the bus was acceptable to the bus company. But this reveals something else. If 20% of people haven't been paying for about 4 years, this means that conceivably some of the people now being asked to start paying haven't done so for much longer than that. But the real issue here is that the city has created a culture of lawlessness throughout its public transportation network. People don't feel like they should pay for something because when they get on, nobody else pays. It's demoralizing, and it costs a lot of money, $2.90. It's not nothing. And even though the people who ride the bus for free are technically stealing, the city has a hand in this because they've allowed things to get to a point where a critical mass of individuals go about doing just that. And they've taught people that our public transit networks, both the subway and the bus, are not worth respecting because nobody punishes you for disrespecting it, which is in fact a battle they may be unable to win because right now things are already at 50% non-payment. We're trending in a direction that is going to steadily approach 100% non-payment, and it doesn't really look like the city has enough resources to deal with this problem in any meaningful way, which means it's only going to get worse. And just before we continue, thank you to Factor for sponsoring today's video and for making my life easy and delicious with their never frozen, ready-to-eat, chef-crafted meals, which I started paying for and receiving on my own about 6 months ago because I can't cook, and even if I could cook, I don't have the time. And before Factor, I was eating an unhealthy amount of expensive takeout food, which isn't just bad for you, it's full of questionable ingredients. But check this out, today I got roasted red pepper, tortellini Italian sausage, 470 calories, making this the fastest way to eat healthy on a regular basis without wasting any time. Because again, these meals are never frozen. They're made by chefs and they're ready in just 2 minutes. That's 120 seconds from fridge to stomach. And their menu's absolutely fantastic. Smoky Gouda chicken, Italian sausage marinara, and I really want to try these blueberry pancakes at some point in the near future. Head over to factor75.com and use code CashJordan50. There's a link in the video description. That's code CashJordan50 at factor75.com. You'll get 50% off your first Factor box and 20% off your next month of orders. Now let's get back to the video. So there are 3 problems with trying to enforce fares on our buses. The first problem is that the general public, to an extent, is against it because they don't think the bus service is worth it. The second problem is the city doesn't have a whole lot of resources to send out police to enforce these things to begin with. And the third problem is that the fines in question aren't actually enough in the minds of some to change the behavior of fare evaders. They think the fines should be higher, which means current efforts at enforcing fare evasion don't look like they're gonna work.
Watch as this man is issued a summons for hopping a bus. He complains to us that everyone does it.
Anybody go inside the bus, nobody pay for. Only me not take outside.
Then he's promptly pulled off a second bus for trying to board again without paying. The MTA is looking to recoup money.
So never mind the idea that fare enforcement to begin with is unjust because it targets the needy and harasses those who can't afford to take the bus in the first place. The idea behind it is that fare evasion is going to scare people and get everyone to start paying. But there's a problem because the math doesn't add up, because according to the New York Post, the $100 fine isn't enough to change anyone's behavior unless they get that fine more than once every 35 days. And if you steal from a regular business, you'll be barred from entering that business. They'll cut you off, but the bus, you can just keep riding it even if you do take it without paying. That's another problem. And there are some who think that if people were to lose their ability to ride the bus or be banned from getting on at all, everyone would pay because people use it to work for a living. They rely on it. It's an essential part of their lives, and losing that essential part of their lives would cost them much, much more than the fare evasion ticket. Yet that's not how we do things in this city. The only people who suffer any consequences from non-paying riders are the riders that do pay because their fare keeps going up, revealing that once again, New York City has created a system that only punishes the law-abiding.
Starting this week, undercover enforcement agents called Eagle Teams started riding buses, observing fare evaders, then escorting them off to issue a summons. The NYPD is on hand to ensure things don't escalate.
The message to the...
So in order for fare evasion to make sense, or consequences thereof to make sense, people have to get caught doing it enough to change their behavior, and they have to see enough people getting caught around them to realize that, hey, this isn't worth it. These guys are on the bus watching me, but that's not what we see. We still see very little enforcement. Yes, there's a few people on the news who are getting tickets, but you know, it's like a small handful of people. And there are many opportunities for people to get on the bus without paying and get away with it. That's a big problem because other patrons are gonna see that and they're gonna think that the city's really not serious about cracking down. In fact, there are just 200 such Eagle teams, those are the enforcement teams that go after fare evaders riding the bus, but we've got over 300 bus stops, so people have a pretty good chance of getting away with it if they want to, like they have for almost half a decade now. It's really sad because it looks like this problem's gotten so big there's no way out for the city. The New York Post says the city would have to be giving out 28,000 tickets a day in order to change the behavior of most of the people who ride the bus. But we're only giving out around 600 violations a day and millions of people ride the bus, revealing that not enough people are likely to be made examples of in order to scare others into compliance. And that's got some elected officials now suggesting that, you know what, this whole battle against fare evasion, it's a lost cause. Let's just make the buses free for everyone and stop trying to enforce fares. Let's just stop collecting them altogether.
How much would that cost?
That's about $800 million a year, which may sound like a lot of money, and it is substantial, but in the context of a city budget that is north of $100 billion and a state budget that is north of $220 billion.
You gotta love politics. Money is never any issue because there's always something else out there that's more expensive than the thing that you want to spend money on. But although an $800 million free bus program sounds a little bit ridiculous, part of me actually agrees that this idea of $800 million worth of free bus rides for the entire city isn't such a big deal when the company, or the agency rather, that runs those buses costs $20 billion a year to operate. And if this bloated agency were to cut just 4% of their budget, they would have enough money for everybody to ride the bus for free. So when you look at it that way, it doesn't seem like it's that big of an idea, right? But we all know that's never going to happen. That budget didn't get so big and so bloated without hundreds of people earning six-figure incomes doing things that don't necessarily lead to more efficiency. And since no one's talking about reducing the MTA's budget anytime soon, it looks like the likely way out of this will be fare evasion crackdowns. But as we already know, there might not be enough of those. So what could the city do to improve its fare collection efforts? Well, one suggestion is that the city could pursue a more aggressive fine collection strategy. What they could do is they could have officers get on a bus after it's been boarded, and they could have every third or fourth rider tap their credit card against a card reader to see if it had been used. If it hadn't been used, they could offer that person a chance to pay a reduced fine on the spot of, say, $50 instead of $100 plus the fare, which would mean instant collection of that fine and the fare, and it would show everybody on the bus that the chances of getting caught are actually way higher than what we're dealing with today. The only good news that's on the table as far as fare collection has to do with the buses and the lanes they operate in. Because you see this red strip of road here that this Uber is stopping in, that is the bus lane. That car's not supposed to be there, and what they're gonna start doing is they're gonna have buses with cameras on them, get the license plates of cars that do this, and issue summonses. This should help improve service if cars and trucks stop stopping here, impeding the flow of the very buses that the city wants people to start paying for. If that starts happening, will buses be faster and better run? Will that help people decide that they are worth paying for? Is offering good, reliable service what the city needs to do in order to revitalize its bus system, or should we punish people worse than we already are for not paying to use it? Is that the right answer? What about that? Would that help the city get some extra money in its pockets? Is that ridiculous? Let me know. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next video.